Everyone to All right, so welcome everyone to Fighting Attacks on Higher Education in Red States. My name is Lauren Gutterman. I'm an associate professor of American Studies and Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies at UT Austin. I'm also representing CAHI, the Coalition for Action in Higher Ed, which is a collective of academic workers, students, union members, and activists within multiple higher education associations, unions, and other organizing spaces. CAHI has organized this National Day of Action to fight back against attacks on higher ed and the repression of students and professors who are exercising their free speech and demanding academic freedom. CAHI understands Palestinian liberation as a core part of the liberation of higher education. The collective has chosen April 17th in commemoration of the beginning of the Columbia encampment and in honor of Palestinian Prisoners' Day. We envision April 17th as part of an arc of escalating actions in and beyond higher ed. We plan to participate in International Workers' Day on May 1st, followed by Nakba Day, May the 15th. So please stay tuned. And if you're not following us on Blue Sky, you should be. I will put that in the chat in a moment. I am thrilled to present our speaker today, my colleague, Dr. Karma Chavez. Dr. Chavez is Bobby and Sherry Patton Professor and Chair of Mexican American and Latino Studies at the University of Texas at Austin. She is the author of several books, including Queer Migration Politics, Activist Rhetoric and Coalitional Possibilities, Palestine on the Air, a collection of radio interviews she conducted related to Palestine, and The Borders of AIDS, Race, Quarantine, and Resistance. In addition, she's an executive committee member of UT Austin's AAUP chapter and a co-founder of our Faculty and Staff for Justice in Palestine chapter. I actually wanted to say much more about all of her amazing accomplishments, but she would not let me. So in Texas, as some people may know, lawmakers' attacks on DEI and the teaching of racial, ethnic, and LGBTQ studies in particular began several years before the current federal onslaught that we're experiencing. And Karma has been at the forefront of this resistance in multiple ways. So I will let you take it from here, Karma.
All right. Thank you, Lauren. Lauren has also been at the center. Lauren's one of my fiercest and most reliable comrades, also on our AAUP's executive committee and a co-founder of our campus's FSJP. So thank you, Lauren, for everything you do at CAHI and AAUP and Hilo and all the partners who are making today possible. And also thank you to all of you for being here. You know, for us being together across campuses, across states is really important right now. Yeah, who knows where we're heading, right? But you know, hopefully we can enact some good resistance together collectively. So I'll tell you a little bit about, sorry, I'm gonna share my screen. So gonna tell you a little bit about how today will go in general. I want to spend maybe 30 minutes, 25, 30 minutes giving you kind of an overview of what's happening or what has happened in Texas as kind of a case study. Talk about our organizing strategies and then offer some takeaways before really just wanting to hear from all of you. I think the more kind of collaborative these spaces can be, the better. But hopefully learning a little bit about what's going on in Texas if you don't know, or even if you do know, it's kind of a refresher. I think will be really useful because what's happening here is pretty significant. So, and I added "and blue states" because I think when I proposed this, maybe that distinction mattered. I don't know that it does now. So just to kind of, I think probably most people in this room are caught up on this, but I don't want to take that for granted. And so the different forces that we're dealing with on the national level, right? I think of these as pillars, and it's important that we are actually thinking of all of these in relation to one another, and not as separate, and not pulling one piece out and just focusing on the other. Because if we aren't taking all of this together holistically, in my view, we're missing the boat, and we're not going to be able to effectively respond to this. So this includes, of course, attacks on so-called DEI, attacks on teaching about race, gender, and sexuality, which is accompanied by this promotion of the idea of degrees of value in workforce development, including at research universities. This involves attacks on faculty governance, relatedly forcing in things called stuff like schools of civic leadership, which are essentially right-wing think tanks on campus. And the sort of long-term goal of these things is to be able to take over the curriculum from liberal arts and humanities. We have to think about attacks on accreditation, attacks on tenure, attacks on federal funding and other knowledge producers like the Smithsonian and Wilson Center. And then going back up to that other one, attacks on student protesters for Palestine, and Palestine more broadly, question of the definition of anti-Semitism. This is the one that can be a sticking point for people because people have divided views. We know the Palestine exception, but if we're not putting Palestine in the center of the rest of this, we are missing the point. That's the national situation. Let's go on to the case of Texas. So I think of Texas as where the Manhattan Institute meets the far-right Texas Republicans. They are far-right, so it won't surprise you, of course, but the Republican Party controls all branches of government in Texas. The only moderates that exist are in the House of Representatives. But they all but two of them approved a voucher bill, which has been a battle for over 2 years now. So they're not that moderate. I think of Texas as a testing ground similar to Florida, although the approach has been very different. And it's for different approaches to dismantling higher education as we know it. And so if you keep an eye on what's happening in Florida, you keep an eye on what's happening in Texas, it might give you a signal of what's coming to you if it hasn't already. Something else to know about Texas, it is a right to work state, right? And I would argue until fairly recently had a fairly disorganized body of faculty workers across the state. So what can we learn from Texas over the last 3 or so years? I'm going to just move through I'm going to focus really on the legislative piece of this. There's so many moving parts, but this will kind of give us something to focus on, which is the legislative battle specifically in 2023. So I'm going to give you a background on some of that bad legislation and the aftermath. I'm going to talk about our organizing efforts related to that legislation. And then again, I'll hit some takeaways here. So I'm not going to read all this. And if anyone wants access to these slides, happy to share them. They've been collectively created by several of us. But the first bill that was really targeted, in the state of Texas in 2023 was called SB 17, and this was a bill that banned DEI programs and practices. So you can see here what the definition of a diversity office was. You can see what the ban includes. So this was DEI offices, officers, programs, practices, and trainings. Anything related to a diversity statement, and sort of any preference at all related to any of those categories. There were exceptions to the ban. So it really only was about offices and programming and stuff. It wasn't supposed to cover academic course instruction, research or creative work, student organizations, guest speakers, and a few other things. And that hasn't really turned out to be the case exactly. And we can talk more about that if people are interested, but it has certainly bled into a lot of other areas of academic life. The results have been more far-reaching than I think people anticipated, even though people anticipated it was going to be pretty bad. So there's penalties, that are associated here, and there's checks and balances around compliance for this. So just some of the maybe unintended consequences that happen. I'm just going to run through a couple examples here. So although national origin or immigration status was not supposed to be part of this law, at the University of Texas, there was a program that was for undocumented students. And as the audits were going on with the implementation of this at the university, This is one of the programs that got swept. Wasn't actually because of SB 17 in the sense that they said it wasn't in violation of SB 17, but they realized that, since they were helping people to navigate the law when they were here without documents, that maybe they were in violation of federal law, so they might as well get rid of it anyway. So that was sort of the kind of thing that SB 17 enabled. Even if it didn't directly impact you, you could get swept up in it. This is an example. Actually, this is a piece that Lauren co-wrote about academic talks that were canceled as a result of the chilling effect of SB 17. So this was one example of this, but there were others where people didn't know what exactly the requirements were and got scared and made some actions that, again, weren't necessarily by the letter of the law, but were part of the chilling effect and the sweeps. Then there are instances like this where people were recording former DEI workers on campuses. And this was an example at the University of Texas at Tyler, one of the smaller ones. And, this woman is getting asked really sort of leading questions. And she's like, no, I mean, we could still kind of do these things, but she had to change the language. And of course, this got released to the media and, had other, again, negative effects as a result. So then this is just a snippet of a letter that came out in late March of 2024. So the law was passed in 2023, went into effect January 2024. A few months later, this is Brandon Creighton, who in Texas we all just adore because he is the jerk that proposes all of these pieces of legislation. But he sent out a request to campuses in order to do an audit. And that audit, he wanted it done by Friday, May 3rd. So this, I think that I can't remember the exact date on this. I think it was March 27th that this came out. And then shortly after that, April 2nd, this is a statement we put out as our AAUP, termination notices were sent to 62 professional staff who used to do DEI work, but who no longer did because we all had to sign a loyalty oath attesting to the fact that we were not doing any DEI work. And so our division of at UT Austin, our division of diversity and campus engagement was community engagement was closed down. And so any staff that was affiliated had gone on to another job, but 62 professional staff were terminated under this. The vast majority were women of color. I think it was something like 88% were women of color who lost their jobs in this sweep. And this is all because of SB 17. And then that was April 2nd. And then for us, it wasn't April 17th, it was April 24th, where our students were brutalized by police as they were attempting to use their First Amendment rights to protest. As a result of that coming so quickly on the firing of these DEI staff, our AAUP put out a petition of no confidence against our president. This was not a no confidence vote by our faculty council. They wouldn't take it up. But we did get over 650 faculty to sign on to this petition of no confidence, given the way so many things have been handled. And we thought it was really important, we still do, to keep, again, the Palestine issue and the First Amendment issues around student protesting in conversation with the targeting of DEI. So, as you can see, this had really far-reaching impacts in Texas. That was not the only bad law, though, in 2023. We also had SB 18, which was designed to initially abolish tenure. They didn't get that goal, but essentially it codifies in state law a tenure system that has all sorts of grounds for termination that didn't exist before, at least in the UT system and also in state law. So there are many reasons for dismissal that are really undefined, vague, or quite expansive. I think the one that concerns me the most is the bullet point. I think it's the fifth one, that you can be terminated for having engaged in unprofessional conduct that adversely affects the institution. So you can easily read between the lines there. That's targeting leftist faculty who are protesting, or leftist faculty who maybe are speaking out about their institution. Um, but it's not the only bad provision there. For example, the definition of professional incompetence has never been given real shape. It's unclear related to, like, what does performance of duties look like. These are all very ambiguous categories, and um, they've been used many times in the state of Texas since this law went into effect in September of 2023 to try to target faculty with termination. The other thing about it is it institutes a summary dismissal. In other words, this basically means you can get terminated without any real process at all. You don't get a chance to examine the evidence upon which your termination is based, and you only can go through a grievance process after you've been terminated. So once you're no longer an employee, I'm not exactly sure how that works. I'm not exactly sure how that's due process, but that's what is state law now in Texas around this bill. So we knew these were going to come at us. We had a good sense of this. And so we knew we needed to develop a kind of strategy. So I'm kind of going backwards a little bit now. So that's what's kind of what ends up happening. But let me talk to you about what we did. So we had to begin by determining our primary targets. There were a lot of bad bills that were proposed in 2023 in the state of Texas that will surprise no one who knows anything about Texas. For our purposes, we had 17, 18. There was also one that was SB 16 that was kind of an anti-CRT law. That one didn't end up being passed. But there were other ones. There was the trans athletes bill. There's a lot of bad K through 12 bills that normally many of us might have been more involved with, but we had to kind of get focused in order to be clear on our objectives. So we started as the first point, I think, is naming our primary targets. We really also, and the we I'm using here is primarily AAUP, focused out on building a broad-based coalition. So the UT Austin AAUP chapter had been dormant for a while and was just sort of getting started again, like 21, 22. And so really kind of getting that some shape very quickly, also trying to fortify the statewide conference and give that more shape and heft as well. Another piece of this was this is something I was sort of central in working on, was connecting gender and ethnic studies leaders throughout the state. So one of the ways I often tell this story is, many people in this room will recognize that AAUP hasn't always historically been great on issues that are of primary concern to communities of color, whether that's academic boycott, whether that's its stance on DEI, or just kind of histories of good old-fashioned racism. So I would say, there's a lot of faculty of color who haven't always found a home in AAUP. And certainly that's been the case at UT Austin. And so I kind of was functioning as a bridge builder here. And so kind of was building ethnic studies and gender studies leaders, and then eventually kind of building that out to other folks who weren't necessarily part of AAUP, but really did care about what was happening. And so created a kind of shadow organization we called the Texas Faculty Coalition, that was a way for people to tap in who maybe weren't yet with AAUP. That has kind of faded now. I think we've gotten everybody on side to be a part of AAUP. But we also had other partner organizations like Texas Association for College Teachers, Texas Faculty Association, Texas State Employees Union, American Federation of Teachers, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund was a huge partner of us here, a coalition that was created called the Texas Students for DEI, another called Black Round Dialogues on Policy, and then the Black Legislative Caucus and the Mexican American Legislative Caucus. I'm probably forgetting folks, but this is the coalition we began building out. Like, these were our relationships. I think the other things that we did early on is we really needed to identify what some of our assets were. And so these are three, there are probably many more, but one, among these different constituencies, we had a lot of knowledge about social movements, about how education works, about policy and policy building. We also had a lot of existing relationships with each other as well. And this is, I'm talking about Austin primarily at this point, and with legislators. And then we had diverse academic constituencies. And I don't mean that, an anti SB 17 language, but I mean, we had folks who were in different STEM fields, humanities. So a lot of folks, I think that those were some of the assets. So it's important to do that. I think also thinking about weaknesses, the statewide networks had to be built in many ways from scratch. Some of those exist on a small level, but not as big as they needed to be. A lot of us had very little legislative experience or legal expertise. Certainly a weakness. And then, of course, time. We were all trying to do our full-time jobs during this as well. Continuing on, I think a big part of what we were doing was political education and membership building. So Brian Evans, who's a Texas conference president, was our UT president at the time. He would talk about, AAUP members, but also AAUP enthusiasts. In other words, folks who hadn't quite taken the plunge to become members, but were listening, maybe would show up to testify or show up at social events. We also had a lot of support from the Legal Defense Fund and from AFT, helping bring people to Austin, helping train people to testify, helping to print, helping to organize us in various ways through meetings and other things, including legislative training for first timers. And then, of course, another big part of this strategy was outreach. I mean this on a lot of different levels. So we ended up with a pretty robust media strategy, and I think that's very important for everybody to do. So this included op-eds. It included being willing to do media interviews and having pretty tight talking points. And it included social media. So building a following, being really active on various platforms. The office visits, this is like absolutely the worst part of this work. I'll just put it bluntly, it fucking sucks. You're going around the Capitol talking to people that you don't like. And you're usually talking to like a 22-year-old staffer, right? We learned about how to get our message out there in ways that could be heard. So initially, I think the white papers and things were useful data, but really the one pagers were the way to go. Nobody reads more than a page in the state capitol, and for some of them, I think that's actually a literacy issue, and for others, I think it's a time issue. And you can decide who qualifies for which. Testifying also sucks. And also feels pointless while you're there, but I do think it's important. But a lot of times our testimony would get cited in media. It also, I think, was galvanizing for other people. And if nothing else, there is some satisfaction in making the Republicans, sit there for 12 hours to listen to faculty after faculty kind of, explain why what they're doing sucks. And then protests is another form of outreach. We didn't, I would say, do a ton of protests. We partnered with the African American Policy Forum to do a big May 3rd protest in 2023, which I think was quite successful. We had folks from all over the state. We centered people who were born in Texas and are now teaching in Texas to really show, that we're committed to teaching the population of the state. But definitely a big part of the strategy, maybe the central part in some ways. We also, you have to propose amendments. And so identifying legislative partners who are going to propose those amendments for you on the floor when a bill is at its last stages. We work closely with law students as well as the Legal Defense Fund to help draft amendments. And actually, it was some of the law students who drafted the amendments that ended up making SB 17 less bad than it would have been otherwise. And then, part of the work of this is really when you're in a place like Texas, you're not trying to win exactly because it's very unlikely you will, but you're trying to make things less bad. And it can be important even if it feels unsatisfying. Just checking on a little bit here, just like once things were already in place, the work didn't stop. We all wanted to be very diligent about influencing the implementation on our campuses to make sure that things weren't over implemented or trying to make sure things weren't over implemented, and tracking the effects of these things. How are they impacting people anecdotally? Doing some research, continuing to make connections across these different issues and their impacts, as well as across campuses. Defending those who've been targeted. So as I mentioned, SB 18, that 10-year bill, had a lot of effects on different campuses where folks have been targeted for summary dismissal. And so AAUP has had to be a robust partner in helping to defend them. And then, preparing for the next round, because in Texas, we have a legislative session every 2 years. Whatever the cycle is for you, it's especially now, it's always coming. And so really thinking about how do you prepare for what's coming next? And how do you keep people active without overwhelming them? And that's a huge challenge. And I think most people, for us, we're still so exhausted from 2023 because 2023 bled into 2024, and then the genocide and everything else. It's been a rough time here. But briefly, we had to be ready because in 2025 we've been hit with an omnibus bill called SB 37. It's a really, really bad bill. There's just a few bullet points here. It consolidates curriculum decisions essentially with political appointees to have the final say on curriculum in our campuses. It controls curriculum content to ensure that core curriculum doesn't include, anything that attempts or requires a student requires or attempts to require a student to adopt a belief. The kind of drill on this, right? So it's those of us who do any kind of teaching about race or oppression or privilege. It also sets up thresholds in order to sunset programs that are not conforming to whatever the state legislature thinks needs to be hit. There's huge limitations here on faculty governance. It adds grounds for dismissal for faculty senators. It removes the responsibility for hiring of all kinds, including like teaching assistants, from the hands of faculty, and places additional oversight on tenured hires, but only in liberal arts, communication, education, and social work. So notably, like for our purposes, our School of Civic Leadership, our business school, and all the STEM fields are exempted from this. And only the president can hire most leadership positions, which means probably there won't be even consultations, not required. So this passed the Senate last night or in the last day. It's hard for me to keep everything straight. And so we're going to be using a similar strategy with the House this time around. But I just want to pull this up for y'all. So this is from our Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick. This is what he tweeted after the Senate passed SB 37. And he's been pissed off at loony Marxists on our campus. And you can read for yourself what he has to say. But part of why I want to put out here is because one, it's flagrant, this hatred of faculty, but also this is the kind of stuff that can really have a chilling effect because nobody wants to be targeted in this way. It can feel very threatening. Lauren and I, for example, last year there was a representative who sent Lauren and I and the other executive committee members of the UT Austin AAUP a letter telling us that we should resign, signed by something like 80 of his colleagues. That can really make you feel nervous about doing this kind of work. But I think put it out there, let y'all see it, let's all see it, let's laugh about it, and then let's keep doing what we're doing. So some takeaways here. Advanced and ongoing faculty organizing. If you're not organized on your campus, you have to get organized. You don't have to organize everybody on your campus. I mean, we've done a lot of what we've done. In 23, I would say there's maybe 30 to 40 faculty at UT Austin, and maybe only a couple hundred around the whole state that were really, really active. But I think you can do a lot with that. So whatever the numbers are on your campus, focus on just keeping organized. Big takeaway here, we don't face a rhetorical situation, but we do need clear messaging. What I mean by that is this is not the kind of time when your persuasion, your good arguments, your evidence, none of that matters. It really doesn't matter in terms of its persuasive value. That is not going to do the trick. But it is important to have clear messaging. We are in a situation where there are some of the reason why people don't like higher ed is on us as faculty. We have not done a good job messaging what we do. And so I think that's really important in your local context to be focusing on clear messaging. What we really do also have to focus on, though, is leveraging power. Some ways to do that, I think, is to have an alumni strategy. So who are your alum? Who are the ones who are powerful? Who are the ones who will be willing to speak out on your behalf? Local community and business organization strategy, right? Community leaders who are willing to defend an institution. And a student strategy. There's a lot of fear around organizing faculty to student because of the threat that they say we're indoctrinating them. They're going to say you're indoctrinating students anyway. And I can tell you, students sometimes have way better ideas than we do about what needs to be done. And even if they don't, it's a great learning opportunity for them about how this stuff works, and it can create really important partnerships. The key takeaway: we have to demand courage from those with the most privilege. So tenured faculty, I'm sorry, like there's just no excuse, or I can think of very few excuses for you not to be out front and center using your voice. It is important for you to, for what is the privilege of tenure if you're not going to use it in this way to defend your own damn job? So courage has to be demanded, I think, rather militantly. We also need diverse voices in the media. Again, don't mean this like race or gender, but Lauren and I are in the media constantly because very few people are willing to do it. But people have to be willing to put themselves out there. They need to hear it from a variety of people. Also need to be placing internal pressure against anticipatory compliance. So once stuff happens, we have to make demands on our administrators and not be afraid. They are, after all, just our peers. Last thing I'll say is we need a million experiments right now. We don't have to do things the exact way like some leader with some ideology says. I think it is time for us to just try things out. It may not work. Oh well, try something else out. Keep trying. That can be for this focus on legislation, but ultimately for whatever the issue is in your area. We need everybody kind of all hands on deck doing the thing right now, and really thinking about your local situation and how you can make things work within the context of that. And I think that is, for me, that's like the biggest thing is just like get out there and do it. You don't have to be a seasoned person to do that. So I'm going to stop sharing so I can look back at your lovely faces or names at least. And then let's have a conversation about what y'all are facing. If there's anything I can assist you with, anything at all.
Thank you so much, Karma. That was amazing. You included so much information very efficiently. I wanted to let people know, I think Mariah's managing the recording. We'll turn off the recording.